Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 18 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, and once again, we are coming to you from the worldwide headquarters of GSM Services, and we continue looking forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We simply believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week and have Ann Tippitt with us today. Ann is the executive director of the Schiele Museum. So, Ann, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And full disclosure, this is, I said this as we were talking beforehand, but this is literally like having Gaston County royalty in the room, and is the first guest and organization that was one of our original questions about, I think we used to ask, what is the favorite Schiele Museum exhibit? And we may ask that.
Okay.
And that's probably an unfair question for you.
I'll wait for it.
But we're going to, we will probably do that before we're finished. So we're going to get right to it, Ann. If you don't mind, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Arkansas, and I grew up in a family of teachers and preachers, and I was the shyest person in a large family. Wouldn't believe that, would you? But I was very shy. But my family, I'm actually back home, coming to North Carolina. My family was here in the mid-1700s. Both my grandfather, great-great-great-grandfathers were involved in the Revolutionary War, and then after the war, instead of taking land, they took the money, and they left Hillsborough, went across the line into Tennessee, and then over the next however many years and generations, the family hopped across Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, landed finally in southwestern Arkansas and eastern Texas. And so I've kind of come back home after all that time. When we first moved here, was about 34 years ago. And someone that you probably remember, Kaz Taylor, was real estate.
Very much so. He was a long-time customer of ours.
He became one of our very, very first friends and friended us. And I was talking about buying a house, and he said, you're not going to be here 15 minutes. Well, this many years later, one thing led to another, and this place became home, and it's home.
So how long, you may have said that, how long ago was that?
That was about 34 years ago.
Okay.
I've been at the museum almost 32 years.
Oh, wow.
So it's home.
Yeah,
It's a great place. I mean, you've got the ocean that way and the mountains that way, and we're 20 minutes from a fine airport.
It is a unique location. I mean, it's close to the mountains, the beach, and everything within the county is kind of unique. So, and I don't know officially how many years you have to be somewhere to call it home, but I think that qualifies. So, can you kind of talk about how you ended up at the museum and what brought you there? And maybe even, you would think that most of our listeners would kind of know the history. I don't want to, and I know a little bit personally about the history of the museum, but kind of share a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Well, my husband came here first.
Okay.
Dr. Alan May, to start the archaeology program here. And he was invited over here. We were in Chapel Hill. I was finishing my degree, and he had finished his. And there was some issues and some things here in Gaston County, and so he was asked to come over and speak with the Archaeology Club and the Schiele Museum. And we only had one vehicle at the time. And so he took that one vehicle, and of course there I'm in Chapel Hill, but I had buses. It was all right. And I thought, Gastonia. So I started looking it up. Now, this was a long, long ago before the internet was as powerful it is today, and
right.
I didn't learn as much immediately. And when we talked that night, I said, there can't be a real museum over there in Gastonia. And he said, oh, my dear, you are very wrong.
Yes.
There is a real, honest-to-goodness museum with, documentation and objects and exhibits And so after I finished my degree, I came here not really intending to work in a museum, but Alan Stout hired me to be the first. I was a curator of collections. So all of a sudden, I had worked doing my archaeological research. I had worked in a lot of museums and worked around them and knew how the collections area worked and what the requirements were, but I'd never been responsible for them. And Alan Stout said in his usual way, Alan was the second director of the museum. Alan said, "Oh, you'll be fine." And so that's where I started in the collections area, and then over the years, I moved from that to the director of interpretation. So I moved to the public programming side.
Okay.
And that's where I really, really, really felt that I could use my anthropological background. And it was a lot more fun than doing academic research. And to me, it was a lot more meaningful. It was a lot more meaningful to be able to bring ideas directly to the public, to our students and our families. And Alan was the second director. And I came to learn from him and from others over the years a lot of the history of the museum. Because a lot of people that come to our museum, one of their questions of our front desk staff is, especially if they're from out of town, they'll say, "What is a museum like this doing here?" And it's very hard for staff not to be insulted by that, because you want to say, "Well, what does that mean?" But what they're saying is, "Wow."
Yeah, that's absolutely.
And the answer to it is because of two people, Bud Schiele and Lily Schiele, his wife. He was with Boy Scouts of America, and they were recruited to come here so that he could run and start the Piedmont Scout Council. There were scout troops here, but they weren't organized in a multi-county council. So he and Lily came here in 1924. They lived right over there at the corner of South Street and 2nd, the Armstrong Apartments.
Okay, yeah. I don't
so
think I knew that.
They lived in that building until they moved into a house that was down Union Road right next to where Chantilly's used to be.
Okay.
Right there where I think it's a dollar store. But they worked from 1924 to 1957 to develop the scouting program. She was really his partner in life and in teaching. And so the two of them really just established the foundation for the Piedmont Scout Council. She actually started Cub Scouting, and that was sort of her thing. They both had passionate interests. She was really interested in Native Americans, Native American lore, and collected objects from all over this country, but mainly in the Southwest. He was interested in anything that involved the natural world, rocks, minerals, bugs, outer space, telescopes. He just had a really broad, curious mind. And he was an avid photographer and an excellent photographer. He also had one of the early movie cameras in this area. And so we actually have movies that he shot at Scout Camp from the late 30s all the way through until his retirement in 57.
Wow, that's unique.
And it is. It's an incredible historical piece because you can watch those over the years because he had the same script. Here are the boys arriving at camp, and the vehicles that brought the boys to camp changed over the years, from panel-sided trucks picking up kids in the mill villages to individual family cars. The shape, the size, the uniform changed, but the flavor of how they both operated that camp stayed the same. And their goal was to raise good citizens.
Right.
Their goal was to raise young men that would be really committed to their community, their church, their family, that would know all about stewardship and what their role was, and to be conservators of the natural world. And,
so how did that lead to what we see now?
BSA had required retirement.
Okay.
At 65. So when he turned 65, the BSA program said, "Goodbye, here's your Oldsmobile." And he was not finished yet. He went on he wanted to do something, and he had longed to have a museum all his life. he grew up volunteering at the Commercial Museum in Philadelphia, where he was born and raised, and so was Mrs. Schiele. And so he had longed to have a museum, and he basically the scout office over that was on 3rd and South on that corner, the upstairs of that was basically a museum because all the things that they had collected, they had there to be used in the scouting program to teach. And so he offered those to Gaston County if a museum could be built. And Gaston County built the first building over there on that same property where we are. It's the building that you see there at the light with the arches. Yeah. That was the original building. It was 1,500 square feet. And they were incorporated in 1960, and construction in that time, and then opened to the public in 1961.
Okay.
And so that's, that was what he had longed to do, and they donated all of their collections, and that formed the foundation of what we still do today. We do natural history and cultural history.
All right. Well, that's an interesting story. I'm going to go real quick to this whole story you brought up. And I think it's one of those stories that, most people that live in Gastonia or Gaston County should know that story, but I'm afraid most people don't. It's one of those hidden gems. When you talked about the question that people ask when they come to the museum is, what in the world is this museum doing in Gastonia? I'm also afraid because I grew up in Fern Forest, and then I moved to Churchill Drive. I went to public schools, and I've gone to the museum so many times, especially growing up. I think even myself kind of got just got so used to it, you kind of forget as a citizen here. You forget what a gem this museum is, and that's kind of unfortunate. But it is. I mean, it is I'm sure you can expand on this, but in your world, I mean, the Schiele Museum is quite a well-known facility, isn't it? I mean, correct?
We're very well known,
yeah.
And the investment of this community has allowed the museum to grow and mature over all those years, and that has been recognized by the American Alliance of Museums. So we are accredited and have been since 2004. We're also associated with the Smithsonian, and we're an affiliate of the Smithsonian.
Okay.
And both of these were programs where the museum's practice of best practices and are recognized. And we also pass all the tests for borrowing things from the Smithsonian. So we've had a lot of things in our building over the years. We also participate in their sites program with some of the exhibits, like the narwhal exhibit that we just had was something that we rented through the Smithsonian. But our research has also had ramifications and waves beyond here in Gastonia. Dr. Alan May has a number of publications, one in the Handbook of North American Indians with the Smithsonian. Steve Watts was certainly known nationally and internationally with his primitive skills and his work with many, many different groups and at many different levels, not only programming for third graders at the Schiele Museum, but also being on the History Channel and other kinds of venues. And so, and some of the lesser seen things is that we have a large entomology collection, and our entomologist is retired, and the time is volunteered, but that person has identified, Dwayne Flynn has identified a number of specimens, the first time, new species.
Oh, wow.
And through Don's work and others in that area, a lot of the research collections of the Schiele are also known far beyond outside.
Right,
here.
yeah. Probably, I bet there's some instances where it's more well known outside of Gaston County, maybe even within Gaston County.
Yeah.
So this may be I don't know if there's is there a specific mission that the museum has or something that you can share related directly to that? Yes,
our mission today is very much what it was in the beginning. Some of the words have changed a little bit, but our main goal is to inspire wonder and curiosity, to help people appreciate the natural world and feel a responsibility and a stewardship for it. Mr. Schiele used some very different language, which was dated,
right.
And he was going to inculcate this into the citizens, but we take more of the approach of inspiring wonder. So
that sounds like the Disney of museums. That's just what came to mind. Yes. So I know this is probably a tough question, but can you talk about some of the initiatives of the museum, or is there? I'm not sure if you would describe that as exhibits or just kind of some of the things. I mean, you've talked about so many things already, but is there anything else kind of on that type of question that you want to talk about?
Well, when we put together our strategic plans, they're usually centered around several different initiatives, and just about always one of those is to develop an exhibit, a new exhibit.
Okay.
Because believe me, our visitors come in the door wanting to know what's new. And so, what
have you done for me lately, right?
What have you done for me lately? So we are very conscious of that. And so one of our initiatives is in addition to maintaining all the wonderful permanent exhibits we have, but one of our goals is to also have something new.
Okay.
And some of those exhibits are up for 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 months. Some of them, like Creepy Nature's, been up for a couple of years. We also have initiatives that really look at the building and look at the grounds and always looking to see what we can do to expand what we do within that footprint of 20 acres. And so that has led over the years to the expansion of the building. And the original building was 1,500 square feet. And today we're about 77,000 square feet.
Okay, wow.
We have a lot. We have a
little
lot
bit different.
We have a lot of HVAC units on top of all of that, as y'all know.
And roofing.
That's
right.
As you know. So adding as space and funding permits, we always have some capital initiatives out there, and we always have a main driving mission, if you will, to bring the best that we can in terms of programming to our families and our students, and to be able to adjust and survive in changing circumstances. And this last couple of years has really presented one, on the 16th of March, the governor said, close your doors. Yeah. And we did for a few months. But then after a couple of 3 months, he said, but walking trails and nature trails can be open. Well, we took that as an open door.
Sure.
And we set about moving as many of our programs, both for students and for families, outdoors. So anything that we could reframe the program, adjust it, whatever we needed to do to be able to take it outside so that people could come. And then toward the end of the summer and the early fall, we were able to have people back in the building. But we have continued to put that emphasis as much as we can with something outdoors. And that led to one of the things that we've been wanting to do for a long time. And a long time ago, I had someone tell me, never waste a good crisis. When you're in one, you'd think, that's really something I don't want to think about. Yeah. But something we had been planning in our minds and wanting to do for a long time was to take the area that we call the farm.
Yeah.
Prime territory. It's right there next to the parking lot. Great accessibility. And what we've been able to do is to take that farm and really shift the focus a little bit, really broaden the focus. Mm-hmm. So instead of looking just at the 18th century, we still do the 18th century. We talk about lifeways and the people that were here and the animals that they had and how they lived and how they made a living, how they interacted with the Native Americans that were living nearby. We still do that, but now we also talk about agricultural history in different time periods and have really broadened the perspective about what do we eat, where does our food come from. And I've heard some fantastic discussions in our outdoor raised bed area, between parent and child going, that's broccoli. And the other one going, that is not broccoli, that's kale. I don't think we would have ever had that kind of parent-child interaction at the Schiele Museum before we planted these gardens. We have bees, we have chickens, we have alpacas, we have pigs. Some people on our staff are very enamored of these.
You still have a turkey, is that correct?
We have turkeys.
Yes.
And
I remember the turkey appearance at Rotary.
Well, that turkey, you should see that turkey now.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, Geraldo is quite the full-grown and quite impressed with himself. He's probably going to have to go on trial sometime in November or so. I don't know. He might have to be pardoned. We're working on that.
Well, we're not going to go there on this episode, but
No.
we'll have a follow-up on that later in the year. Okay, looking back at your time at the museum, is there one, again, I'm sure this is a really tough question, but is there one specific thing, maybe two, that you're most proud of accomplishing, things that you're most proud of accomplishing at your time at the museum?
I think one of the things that I have seen is the growth in our staff. And I don't mean just in terms of numbers. Our staff, has increased in size over the years. But it's been wonderful for me to be part of seeing a staff that has really broadened their skills. It's amazing. It's amazing what they can do. I mean, we have someone on our staff that can he took styrofoam. He took a big block of styrofoam. It looked like a big, huge refrigerator freezer, and he created an ice cream cone. So inside that block of styrofoam, he found this ice cream cone when we did the exhibit on Tony's Ice Cream and their anniversary. He took clay and he made a kraken. There's this in the Creepy Nature exhibit. There's this incredible octopus, and I could go on and on about the talents and the skills. So that when you come there and you see something, we have now accumulated the staff with the skill and the expertise that it's really hard to think of something they can't build.
Sure.
They built a Mars rover to scale, but we do a lot of everything in-house because it's more cost-effective. We can't really, if you rent an exhibit to put in a museum nowadays, the cost is so prohibitive. So we have talented carpenters, finished carpenters. So when you come there and you see an exhibit, we've built it.
How many staff are there, if you don't?
We're probably sitting around about 26 or 27 right now.
Okay.
During the summer, when we have the funding, we like to have summer staff come on because we run different kinds of programs during the summer that require more transportation of students and things like that.
So, again, you've shared a lot of answers to this next question already, but come maybe in your own words or maybe shift gears a little bit. Why would you just say Gaston County specifically is better because of the museum is here?
I think the museum has enriched, the quality of life has enriched the culture from the day that the museum opened. The museum served this community, but it also was something that the community, I think, over the years has grown more and more to be proud of. It's also a place that attracts people from outside here. And if you go back and look at some of the old visitor logs from the 60s and the 70s, that's before there was an interstate and before there was an internet.
That's right, yeah.
There were people coming here. Now, how they got here, how they found out about it, I'm not exactly sure. Mr. Schiele had a lot of networks across this country through his friends in the Park Service and the Forest Service. And the word had kind of gotten out, and I think that is one of the things that the Schiele has contributed to Gaston County, is created a destination, some reason that someone would want to come here.
Well, I'm in a what's called it's a mixed group. It's a peer group with other contractors from all over the country, and we twice a year we go visit someone's business in their town. And I guess it's been maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. They came to here to visit our company, and one of the outings one afternoon, I took them to the museum, and we actually you guys were great to set up. These are guys from Missouri, Chicago, New York, Texas, Michigan, so it was guys from all over the country, California, and to be able to take them there, and we actually had a private planetarium show. I mean, it was just, it was to your point about somebody asking, how did this end up in Gastonia? I think that was actually, their reaction. I mean, nothing that they could find better in St. Louis or Chicago or wherever they might have been from. So it was nice to be able to impress them with the great Schiele Museum in Gastonia.
I'm always glad to hear that. And yes, our planetarium is an impressive facility. Mr. Schiele was responsible for building the first planetarium, which would have been in 66, 67, and that seated 75 people. And then in 89, we added on to the building significantly and added a planetarium that seated 150. Yeah. And over the years, we've got a few more seats than that in there now, but it's the second largest dome in the state. And we can do full dome projection in there now, thanks to a project that was totally privately funded by donations from this community. So if you can construct or build the program in a computer, now we can run it. So it's totally run off of a computer. The old days, they were tapes and movies and all kinds of.
Oh yeah.
Mr. Jim Lynn, for whom the planetarium is named, in the days of special effects, he had to create them. So when we took the old planetarium down, there were all kinds of strange things, and because he had a thing that made a kind of an effect around, different planets and whatever, and we couldn't figure out how he had done that. Well, when we got up behind the walls, we found baby food jars with crinkled up colored aluminum foil and stuff in there, and it's pretty amazing. And so I saved those.
Well, I knew him. I mean, I actually grew up and graduated high school with his daughter, Andrea. So I've known that family for a very long time. And of course, we had some insight on some of the early planetarium shows because of that as well. And I have to shout out to GSM real quick. I think two of our proudest projects that we are most proud of is the dome roof and the manner in which that was done, and then the green roof. Yes. That up there at the museum, and so we've been fortunate to have opportunities to work on projects like that. But those two, there's not many things I enjoy more than going to the top of to the roof there at where the green roof is. So it's
a wonderful spot, and we have the natural meadow that's up there now. Yeah, it's not a sculptured garden. You can go there and see what is happening naturally in terms of. But the plants have really started to reseed themselves, and it's a great environment for pollinators.
Yeah. I have to give Charlton Torrance a shout-out for that, because I know he was a big part of that.
He was a driving force.
Yes, in a big way, and among other things that he helped from a philanthropic standpoint here in our county. So if you can look ahead a little bit, what do you envision the museum, looking like in 5 to 10 years down the road?
Well, we're where we are. We're not going to pick up and move. So whatever we're going to be, we're
push Greer Middle School out of the way.
No. Well, I think that one of the last school board meetings, the school board voted to move Greer up on the rehab renovation replacement list. And so it's certainly not top secret that we've been looking at that property for a lot of years. But they're going to continue to have school there.
Oh, sure.
And we have had a relationship with that school almost from day one. I mean, the museum is where it is because the museum was built on land that was left over and not used when Greer was built in 54, 55. So it's like a little piece of land down there that was available. We have done all kinds of programs with them over the years. We had a science academy for 6 years funded by Burroughs Wellcome Fund with them, and just a close relationship. And I think maybe in 5 or 6 years we could possibly see some really exciting things happen in the growth of that relationship. As they explore, their property, and as they explore what this new school is going to look like and what its focus is going to be.
Can you? So we're going to shift gears here in just a minute or two. But is there anything I haven't asked you, or anything that you'd like to share about the museum before we kind of move on a little bit? There may not be. I mean, you've covered a lot. So what advice, before we get to the questions that everybody, especially all of the staff at the museum, is really wanting to know about you, what advice would you give somebody wanting to get involved with an organization like the museum or make it a career? What would you share to maybe some young listener out there?
Be willing to learn, be willing to do anything. If you really want to learn any business, whether it's building, a museum, whether it's learning to bend metal.
Right.
I remember those stories from Gaston to sheet metal. So you have to have an open mind and be willing to, if you really want to learn the business, you've got to be willing to do just about anything. Because starting in a smaller museum, you're going to have opportunities to do all kinds of things. You may be cleaning the bathroom, before things open, and you may be doing a program later that afternoon for people. But I think that's true for probably any place in life. If you're open to what's around you and you really want to learn, it's best to learn it, I think, from the ground up.
Yeah, that's very good advice. I think I've also learned, kind of related to that question, is I think when we're young, we like to think our career or whatever is always a straight line, but I've learned it's more like a big squiggly all over the place line to get to the destination. And then that might not even be the final destination. There may be something else along the way.
It's more fun that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And scary.
So we're gonna shift gears real quick, Ann, and then of course obviously we'll come back to the museum and make sure that we close out with that. But we're going to do what we call, this is our round, and today I'm calling it, Do You Really Live in Gaston County round of questions, okay?
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
These are very important. So you've already mentioned Tony's ice cream, but what's your favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me. Is that our first person that said vanilla? I think it is.
Mr. Coletta don't tell him I said that. He has tried for years to convince me there are other flavors that are better.
Well, just for the record, and I haven't said this in a few episodes, at least you didn't pick lemon like Vincent Cherry did. So that's an ongoing thing. If you listen to any other episodes, you'll hear that more than once, because he was the first person I've ever heard of say lemon was his favorite flavor. So that's for you, Vinny. Sundrop or Cheerwine? Or neither?
Neither.
Is there something else, or you're just not a soda person?
I'm not a soda person.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And Jay Falls was so generous with us when we had the pirate exhibit, and he ran a special can. Do you remember that can?
Yeah, I do think I remember that. Yeah.
When that can was coming off the line and doing all the upside down and turn, and he took the first one off and he opened it up and he handed it to me, and I was like. And I told him later, I said, I've never had that in my mouth before.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That was my first experience and my last.
How about your favorite local restaurant?
Oh, that's not fair.
Exactly.
Because
that's why we ask some of these questions.
I'll tell you why. Because when we first moved here, there was no choice, hardly. There were fish camps.
30 some years ago. Yeah, that's true.
There was not a lot, but today
the environment's a little different now.
You can go to By Me. You can go, to Viva Taki. You can go.
It's all good.
To the Web. You can go to Barristers. You can,
That was a very politically correct, cover them all answer there, Ann. That's good. All right, this is.
And I'm seeing at all of those, so that's not.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question because I asked this question anyway. As an NC State guy, I get tired of hearing about UNC and Duke all the time. So I'm going to ask UNC, Duke, or NC State?
UNC Chapel Hill.
Can we hit the crickets button?
Oh, no.
Oh,
I have a degree from there.
Well, I already knew that was the answer, so I asked anyway. Of course, I think I say this every episode when that comes up. Of course, I'm married to Tar Heel, so, I have a mixed family, so it's all good. What is something very few people know about you?
that I'm shy.
I don't believe that.
Way down deep inside. The shy person's still there.
Oh. How about a recent book? It doesn't have to be a recent book, but is there a book or something you would recommend to our listeners?
Well, I love to cook. I love to cook. I love to cook for people that I love. And I am a foodie. I read a lot about food. I read a lot about the history of food. And I have been rereading Cooked by Michael Pollan, who is a noted food author and science author.
Okay.
And in Cooked, he deals with some of the basic elements of fire, water, air, that produce all the things that we love, like barbecue. So the chapter on fire in Michael Pollan's Smoked is to me is an outstanding anthropological perspective on humans and what we eat and why we eat what we do and why we like to share it once we've cooked it. Another book I read recently is called Black Smoke, and it's Adrian Miller. And I had read some of his articles and books he had written on the history of black chefs in the White House, and over many, many years, and the different flavors and the foods that they brought to the White House, and what different presidents really liked and really ate, not what was on the state dinner table. But I learned about his book from the blog with Tommy Tomlinson.
Oh, okay.
On WFAE. It's called Black Smoke, and it's written by Adrian Miller.
Okay, I'll have to look into that one.
I'm pretty sure. But he talks about the African-American role in Southern barbecue. And so there's a historical beginning, but then he really gets down into vignettes and stories about different black pit masters. Okay. And not all of them are men. And there's some wonderful stories in there and some recipes. And it just broadens, I think, it broadened my view.
Oh, I'm sure.
Of when you think about barbecue.
So speaking of barbecue, are you more of a Eastern North Carolina barbecue or a Western North Carolina barbecue person, or just all of the above?
Probably both. I respect both, understand both, like both.
All right, so I grew up in Arkansas and Texas, where barbecue is a whole different. It's a different.
Yes.
Is it fair to say there's more brisket type stuff there, or
more brisket, more tomato?
So
it's red.
So here's the unfair question, and can you say a favorite exhibit, whether it's permanent or one that you've had visiting, or temporary, or any exhibit, or I'm going to put you on the spot.
One of my favorite personal exhibits that we had at the Schiele Museum was the pirate exhibit.
Okay.
Some people looked at us and went, "Can you tell me how that fits in with the mission?" And it did. We found all kinds of natural history in the history of pirates. I mean, pirates moved food. Some of the foods that we know and love came to be because pirates were moving those foods around amongst the Caribbean islands. So we all
North Carolina has a little bit of pirate history as well.
We do. On the coast, we do, yeah. And we love sweet potatoes and all of those other things that got moved around.
That's a good point.
But I think the artistry that Steve Watts and the exhibit staff brought to that we built a ship inside 4 rooms that are not on one level.
Yeah.
That level changes significantly from that first room down those ramps. But you felt like you were walking in and through a ship. And the artistry of that was I really enjoyed that. And then we built a smaller version a couple of years later in a small room off to the side. And that thing was loved to death until it began to fall apart. And so I know that the public still remembers it because coming down the hall the other day, I heard a young boy, and he was running ahead of his grandfather, and he said, "It's in here, it's in here." And he got there, and the room was closed.
Oh.
because that little pirate and I
Going,
thought,
that's like
oh
going
God,
to-
I thought he was going to cry. He had been looking forward to bringing
Like
someone
going to
there, so-
Disneyland, and the one ride you want to get on is closed for repair or something.
But what's going on in that room? And I stopped and told him, I said, what's going on in here is we're working on the next thing, and it's going to really be exciting. So we're bringing sock skating back. So you can come soon to the Schiele Museum.
Sock skating.
Bring your socks, and it's a...
It sounds like something you might want to make sure the insurance is updated.
Yeah, we did.
Well,
Or we better.
Well, listen, I appreciate, indulging us on those questions. We do like to ask a few questions specifically about, Gastonia and Gaston County. So we're going to get back to the museum, and we've got just a few more questions, and we'll be finished up here. But kind of, can you share, in your view, and why, besides the Schiele Museum, why is Gaston County such a great place?
I think it goes back to what I said before about location.
Right, yeah.
I think the location, we're close to the mountains, but we're enough inland off and away from the fall line that you get a little bit of rolling landscape. Mm-hmm. So it's not flat, it's not coastal. There's a rich history here. The Native American trading path, which came right through just to the east of us, they say it's Trade and Trine in Charlotte. It probably is somewhere around in there. So prehistorically, this was a pathway, and whether those paths were originally trod by migrating animals, very well could have been. Native Americans certainly moved up and down the East Coast. And then in historic times, the Great Wagon Road came close enough to here that people came into this area quite early, coming down from Philadelphia. I cannot imagine what that journey was like in a covered wagon, bringing yourself in some of Grandma's china, which we know happened from excavations at the Hoyle homestead. Is that those early arrivals in late early 1800s, there was some, Dr. Alan May has found some small pieces of some very fine china that someone carried delicately and carefully down from Philadelphia into that area. So there's a rich history here, and I think that the geography has led, therefore, to a development of a kind of a style and a location that lends itself to a lot of different directions, and I think that's what we've seen here.
Yeah, I think it is. It's just for everything you described, plus a lot of other reasons. It's a unique place, a unique location from where we are.
But home is what you make it.
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
And I think the people here, and I think that's probably the main thing that Alan and I really enjoyed from the beginning, is that we were warmly received, and from the beginning have made friends, and we have people that we consider family here.
Well, I appreciate that greatly. So this is my favorite question that I ask at each episode. If you could look back, just a few years, look back to your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Do you want an honest answer?
Yes.
I would probably tell myself not to get married the first time because I was too young. I was 21, but that was still too young, and I still give that advice to young people. But I would tell myself probably most of all is just calm down.
Yeah.
Stop taking everything so seriously. You have to take enough seriously to be able to take care of yourself and, be a good citizen and be a good family member and be a good person in your community, but just kind of calm down and just don't take everything with the same degree of seriousness. But I don't think you can do that until you've had some experiences that teach you that lesson.
Unfortunately, it feels like age and experience is required to have perspective, isn't it? I mean,
yes, it is.
My 20-year-old self pretty much had zero perspective on much anything. Yeah, and the things that I look back now that seem like such a big deal back in whatever year that was, 1990. Mm-hmm. Was just not as big a deal as it felt like at the time.
And I think it takes time to find, certainly in relationships, to find your life's partner. But when you do it, it just makes everything in life fall into place.
So this has been really good. But so before we finish, I do want to go back a couple of episodes when Sharon Padgett was on from the YMCA, mm-hmm. and I asked her a question about her favorite Schiele Museum exhibit. And Sharon, I know you're listening, and your answer was that you had never been to the Schiele Museum. So this is for all of our listeners, anyone out there who knows Sharon Padgett. Sharon, Ann now knows that you have never been to the museum, or maybe you have been since I gave you such a hard time. But that's kind of going to be one of the last things we talk about here today is anybody, again, this is our mission, is to get Sharon as quickly as possible out to the museum. So
I'm going to come find you, Sharon.
Yes. So by the time this actually airs, we're recording this on Tuesday. What's today? September 21st. It'll be released next Thursday, which I think is the 30th. So hopefully by then, maybe before the entire county hears about this, Sharon, you will have been to the museum. So this has been really good. And so, where can listeners go to learn more about the museum or get involved? I mean, are there ever any volunteer opportunities at the museum? Or
there certainly are. And the best way to find out about us is SchieleMuseum.org.
Okay.
You can find out, there's a special link there that'll tell you more about the history of the museum and celebrating our 60th anniversary. You can find out about all the up-and-coming programs. You can find out about volunteering. You can find out how you can give and support us.
Very good, yeah.
All right there in one spot.
That's all
one
important.
One spot shopping.
Well, good. Hopefully, and if nothing else, I hope nothing else comes from this, is maybe somebody that lives here will hear about this for the first time. I would be surprised if surely there's nobody that lives in Gaston County that doesn't know about the museum. But you know what? You never know. As I've said multiple times so far today, it is just an unbelievable, unique thing that we have here in the community.
And if there are people out there like that and you come to the museum because you heard this, please tell us when you're there. Okay. Let us know. Let us know where you heard this.
Absolutely. So maybe the 3 listeners we have this week will hear about the museum for the first time. So, again, thanks so much for your time, Ann. So I'm going to finish up here with my own book recommendation and then my quote or thought of the week. And the book recommendation is an old, what I consider kind of an old short classic. It's called Who Moved My Cheese by a gentleman named Spencer Johnson. It's a great little book about how to deal with change and the timing. Maybe we're going through a little bit of change right now, and it seems like every time we turn around, regardless of where you're at in the country or the world, that things are changing so fast, and some planned and some maybe not planned. So go check that book out. My quote for this week is, again, one of my favorites, and I think it's a good one for the times we are living. It comes from Desmond Tutu, who said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." So hope is one of those things that actually keeps me up and looking forward to the next day, because I do, even with kind of the times that we're living in, I still think the best is overall is yet to come. So to all the listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website, gastonsgreat.com, and please follow us on our social media platforms. You can also find us and subscribe on most podcast services, such as iTunes, Spotify, and Google. You can also rate the podcast. That is, if you're going to give us a 5-star, and if there was a 6-star opportunity, I'm sure that's what you would give today's episode. Many thanks to Ann Tippitt from the Schiele Museum for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Amy Anderson and Elizabeth King from GSM Services, and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.